Let's start directly brutally with a question designed to pierce through the layers of conditioning, the comfortable narratives you've been fed. A question they, the architects of your perceived reality, the guardians of the status quo, the engineers of your consent, have likely never explicitly dared to ask you before, but one which has almost certainly been festering, perhaps silently rotting for years, maybe decades, within the deepest, most hidden, most fiercely guarded recesses of your unconscious. What if everything you diligently, obediently do, every single day, fundamentally, existentially makes no intrinsic sense whatsoever? I'm not referring here merely to a lofty, abstract philosophical sense, a lack of some grand cosmic purpose or neat, reassuring spiritual answers that placate existential dread. I mean something far more immediate, more tangible, more viscerally, sickeningly felt. Your predictable, often soul-numbing routine, your demanding, often energy-draining job, the very sequence of mechanical actions you perform the moment you reluctantly, perhaps resentfully open your eyes in the morning and mechanically, almost automatically drag yourself out of bed, often feeling like an obedient, functional body whose vibrant, untamed soul has somehow, somewhere along the way, been stolen, subtly bartered away, traded for the illusion of security, the meager crumbs of societal acceptance, the hollow promise of future comfort. Have you ever experienced that persistent, unsettling, almost ghostly feeling that there exists something deep, primal, essential inside you that simply doesn't fit, cannot be squeezed, cannot be comfortably contained within the prescribed, rigid, often suffocating contours of the world around you, that diffuse yet pervasive low-grade background noise of dissatisfaction, of unease, of quiet desperation that seemingly never truly turns off? No matter how much external success you manage to accumulate, no matter how many boxes you dutifully tick on society's checklist of achievement, as if your entire existence, your precious finite life force were being subtly yet relentlessly inexorably pushed, steered, coerced in a direction you didn't consciously, authentically choose, yet one that nearly everyone else around you seems to passively, almost blindly accept, without protest, without question, without even noticing the invisible chains. What if I propose to you right now, in this moment of potential rupture, that persistent inner noise, that gnawing dissatisfaction, isn't merely a symptom of a failing nervous system, a chemical imbalance, or some inherent personal inadequacy, as you've likely been subtly encouraged to believe? What if it is, in fact, the muffled, desperate cry of your authentic essence, your sovereign self, trying desperately against overwhelming odds to scream for release? What if that pervasive, often nameless discomfort isn't a sign of your failure, but rather a profound existential alarm, a critical flashing warning signal emanating from the core of your being, a signal you have likely been diligently, perhaps even skillfully ignoring, suppressing, rationalizing away for your entire adult life, terrified of its implications? Think carefully, critically about this insidious programming. Since your earliest childhood, from the moment you entered the structured, often soul-crushing environment of formal education, you were likely, implicitly, or sometimes quite explicitly told that you had to study diligently, acquire specific marketable skills, follow a certain prescribed path, primarily almost exclusively to become someone respectable in the eyes of others, someone successful according to external metrics, someone productive within the existing societal economic framework. But did anyone, any teacher, any parent, any guidance counselor ever genuinely, truly pause, look you deeply in the eyes and ask you with authentic curiosity if you authentically, soulfully wanted to be that specific someone they envisioned for you? They spoke endlessly, obsessively of externally defined goals, measurable achievements, societal markers of success, quantifiable progress. But almost always universally, these came with the unspoken yet immensely powerful non-negotiable condition that you must consistently produce, reliably, perform efficiently, deliver results that align with that serve, that perpetuate the system's relentless demands. From the moment you entered school onward, virtually everything, every subject learned, every skill acquired, every evaluation endured, was framed implicitly or explicitly as a preparation for work, as if lifelong work, unquestioning participation in the vast impersonal economic machinery represented the unquestionable, natural, inevitable destiny of every single human being, as if we were fundamentally, biologically, spiritually born for that primary overriding purpose, to be efficient, interchangeable, obedient cogs in the great grinding, productive machine. But pause. Wait a moment, just stop, and dare to ask the forbidden question, what if? Not what if this entire relentless, exhausting, often soul-destroying emphasis on productivity, efficiency, utility, quantifiable results, predictable outcomes, was merely entirely an artificial construct. A grand, elaborate, meticulously staged production theatre. A Potemkin village of meaning in which nearly everyone, almost hypnotized, dutifully, unquestioningly plays their assigned, often ill-fitting part without ever fundamentally, radically questioning the underlying, often nonsensical script. They skillfully, seductively sold you the narrative of work as the primary source of personal fulfillment, as the main path towards achieving psychological completeness, societal worth, existential meaning. But here you are, perhaps decades later, deep into the performance, feeling your authentic soul, subtly yet undeniably crumpled, diminished, suffocated, feeling your days often repeating themselves with the unbearable, maddening echo of predictability, monotony, quiet despair, haunted relentlessly by the persistent, inescapable feeling that something is profoundly, fundamentally wrong, yet remaining frustratingly, agonizingly unable to pinpoint precisely what it is where the source of the rot lies. And perhaps the most unsettling, most insidious aspect of this entire structure, every single time you dare, consciously or unconsciously, to stop the relentless forward momentum, even for a brief stolen second of genuine rest, quiet contemplation, or non-productive being the world, through its ingrained expectations, its subtle social pressures, its internalized guilt mechanisms, often seems to swiftly, almost reflexively punish you. If you don't produce tangible, measurable results, you risk being perceived by others, and perhaps even by yourself, as worthless, lazy, inadequate. If you don't constantly advance, strive relentlessly for more, climb the next rung. On the arbitrary ladder, you are implicitly, damningly deemed to be regressing, falling behind, failing. If you don't engage your precious time and energy in something deemed conventionally useful, profitable, or instrumentally valuable, you are accused, perhaps even by your own harsh inner critic, the internalized voice of the system, of frivolously, irresponsibly wasting precious, finite time. Do you finally begin to realize, perhaps with a dawning sense of horror, the insidious, pervasive nature of the psychological blackmail inherent in this system? They say, the prevailing culture, the economic structure, perhaps even your own deeply internalized beliefs inherited from generations of conditioning, have effectively, brilliantly, devastatingly made you believe that simply resting is synonymous with laziness, a moral failing. That genuinely fully enjoying an experience purely for its own sake, without a specific productive goal attached, without justification, is somehow a sign of immaturity, irresponsibility, or frivolous self-indulgence. That simply contemplating the world, observing beauty, engaging in non-instrumental thought, pursuing knowledge for its own sake without ulterior practical pretensions, constitutes a frivolous, unforgivable waste of time, a deviation from the sacred path of productivity. But who precisely set these arbitrary, often soul-crushing rules? Who decided unilaterally, unquestioningly, that human living, human existence itself, only possesses inherent value, only earns its right to be, if it directly, measurably translates into quantifiable productivity, tangible economic output, or demonstrable societal utility? Whose agenda does this relentless focus truly serve? Here, right here, begins the crucial crack in the facade, the hairline fracture in the seemingly solid wall of conventional reality. That small, initially almost imperceptible fissure, through which a different, perhaps more ancient, more authentic, more deeply human truth begins slowly, persistently, unstoppably to seep through. Because there exists an ancient primal suspicion, one long buried, actively suppressed beneath layers upon layers of industrial, capitalist, and technological conditioning, largely ignored, even ridiculed for generations, that now, perhaps within you, within the quiet chambers of your own awakening consciousness, begins tentatively, powerfully to stir. A suspicion that quietly yet insistently, almost subversively whispers, that perhaps, just perhaps, the human being in its essence, in its core nature, was fundamentally not created primarily to work in the modern, alienated, often meaningless sense of the word. That perhaps all this elaborate, complex, stress-inducing machinery of relentless performance, quantifiable efficiency, utilitarian logic, and constant striving is ultimately, fundamentally nothing more than a modern, sophisticated, highly effective illusion, a comfortable yet confining cage. A sophisticated, invisible prison where the confining bars are not crudely forged from cold iron that you can see and touch, but rather skillfully, almost invisibly constructed from pervasive social expectations, deeply internalized guilt, the gnawing fear of nonconformity and the terror of being deemed useless. Have you ever felt, perhaps fleetingly, in moments of quiet desperation, perhaps persistently, as a low-grade hum beneath the surface of your busy life, that you are somehow inexorably running away from your true self precisely while dutifully, obediently, almost perfectly complying with everything you are supposedly supposed to do, everything society expects of you? That each outwardly productive, successful, socially validated day also represents on some deeper, more tragic level a silent, incremental betrayal of that vital, untamed, perhaps even chaotic part of you. The sovereign core that inherently craves something wilder, something freer, something more intensely, ecstatically visceral and alive than mere efficient, predictable, soul-numbing functioning within a predetermined system. Haven't you ever paused, truly paused amidst the relentless hustle to genuinely critically wonder why activities like art, created purely for expression, not profit, pure pleasure, experienced for its own intrinsic sake, not as a reward or escape, quiet, aimless contemplation, profound, non-utilitarian connection with nature, deep meandering conversation without a specific agenda, are almost always universally relegated to the very bottom, the absolute lowest rung, of the priority list in our hyper-productive, results-oriented culture, treated as mere luxuries, frivolous indulgences accessible only after you have dutifully, exhaustingly finished everything deemed important, everything productive, everything quantifiable. But what inevitably tragically happens when the list of the important, the urgent, the necessary never truly genuinely ends? What happens when that perpetually promised ever-receding future, the one in which you will finally allow yourself to genuinely enjoy life, to simply be, to rest, to play, to explore without purpose, always gets postponed, deferred, pushed just a little further down the endlessly extending road? Look honestly, unflinchingly around you. Observe the frantic, almost hysterical pace of modern life. Everyone is running. Everyone appears incredibly performatively busy. Everyone seems perpetually anxiously in a hurry, but critically discernibly, almost none of them, perhaps including yourself, seem to possess genuine, profound clarity about exactly where they are ultimately going, or more importantly, why they are running so desperately, so breathlessly in the first place. The modern world, in its dominant mode, predominantly doesn't teach you how to genuinely, authentically live. It relentlessly, efficiently, brutally trains you how to efficiently produce. And it executes this training so effectively, so pervasively, so deeply, that when you actually do find yourself, perhaps by accident, perhaps through illness, perhaps through sheer exhaustion, with a rare, unstructured, unprogrammed free moment, you often feel an almost immediate visceral surge of guilt, anxiety, restlessness, profound discomfort, as if silence itself, stillness itself, were inherently a threat, a danger, as if simply being still present, non-productive, were somehow a profound crime, a moral transgression against the unforgiving, ever-watchful God of productivity. Do you truly deeply know what that pervasive, conditioned feeling signifies? It signifies quite simply, quite starkly, that they have effectively won, at least temporarily, that they, the insidious forces of societal conditioning, the relentless demands of the economic system, the internalized voices of judgment, have successfully, perhaps brilliantly programmed you to instinctively, reflexively reject fear and pathologize your own fundamental essential nature. Because being fully, deeply, vibrantly human is ultimately fundamentally not primarily about endlessly producing external results, accumulating quantifiable achievements, or climbing arbitrary ladders of status. It is far more profoundly, far more essentially, about feeling deeply, authentically, intensely. It is about possessing the innate, often suppressed capacity for wasting time without remorse, engaging in activities simply purely for the intrinsic joy, the sheer delight, the absorbing fascination of the experience itself. It is about looking up at the vast, indifferent, mysterious sky in genuine wonder, without demanding immediate practical answers, quantifiable data, or utilitarian applications. It is about allowing yourself, granting yourself permission to spontaneously dance without music, laugh without apparent logical reason, cry without needing a neat, rational explanation, wander without a destination. But that vital, essential, perhaps even sacred part of you, the one that does not neatly produce quantifiable results, the one that does not directly generate economic profits, the one that serves no immediately apparent utilitarian purpose, the one that simply is, that essential core part of your being, you have likely tragically allowed over time, through neglect, through fear, through conditioning, to slowly, silently die from lack of oxygen, lack of attention, lack of validation. You have effectively, perhaps unknowingly, drowned it beneath overflowing schedules, relentless performance metrics, suffocating external expectations, the tyranny of the to-do list. And consequently, every single time you feel that persistent, gnawing, inescapable sense that something fundamental, something vital is missing from your life, despite all your efforts, despite all your achievements, it is likely because you are currently actively living an existence fundamentally structurally designed, not for your authentic flourishing, not for your soul's expression, but actively, insidiously against it. And this precisely, this existential predicament, this modern malaise is where the often marginalized, frequently misunderstood, sometimes deliberately ignored yet brutally lucid, fiercely honest voice of Georges Bataille enters our exploration, not as a provider of easy solutions, but as a radical diagnostician, a philosophical provocateur. Bataille was a radical French philosopher, deeply influenced by Nietzsche mysticism and anthropology, who fundamentally didn't want to teach you how to become more productive, achieve conventional societal goals, or attain predictable, respectable success. His aim, his entire philosophical project was far more revolutionary, far more disruptive, far more dangerous to the established order. He essentially wanted you to get rid of all that limiting, soul-crushing framework altogether. He challenged you, implored you, perhaps even dared you to look courageously, unflinchingly in the forbidden direction, towards the non-utilitarian, the excessive, the sacredly wasteful, the sovereign expenditure of life force. He implored you to accept, even embrace, the very aspects of existence that conventional, rational, productive society desperately, fearfully tries to deny, suppress, pathologize, or control, that your life doesn't inherently have to serve any predetermined external purpose. That real, profound meaning isn't primarily or even significantly found in diligent work, relentless efficiency, practical utility, or quantifiable achievement, but rather potentially powerfully discovered within experiences of waste, in the profound philosophical sense of non-productive sovereign expenditure of energy and resources, within moments of ecstatic boundary-dissolving excess, within the courageous embrace of pure, intense experience undertaken without purpose, without predetermined goals, without calculation, simply, purely, terrifyingly, beautifully, for the sake of intense, authentic, sovereign living itself. And it is here right now, contemplating these radical, potentially destabilizing ideas, where the very ground beneath your conventional understanding, your ingrained assumptions, your comfortable worldview begins inevitably, perhaps frighteningly, to shake, because this is not just a superficial critique of modern capitalism, consumer culture, or the demanding nature of contemporary work. It represents fundamentally a radical declaration of war against the very structure, the core logic, the fundamental assumptions of conventional modern existence itself. It is a rebellion against the pervasive, suffocating tyranny of productivity. What if consider this possibility with radical openness, your entire accustomed way of living, the life you've painstakingly built, the identity you've carefully curated has been in essence a well-constructed, socially sanctioned lie? What if what you currently consider normal life, the accepted baseline of existence, is actually just a thoroughly domesticated, significantly diminished, tragically impoverished version of your true, wild, and more potent? more alive potential. Don't close your eyes now. Don't instinctively defensively switch videos or navigate away to another comforting, distracting tab, because what you're about to hear next will not only likely make you profoundly uncomfortable, it possesses the genuine potential to completely irrevocably disarm your usual defenses, shatter your ingrained complacencies. It will compel you, perhaps, force you to look critically, honestly, perhaps for the very first time at everything you do, everything you have diligently, obediently done throughout your entire life, and force you to ask the fundamental, potentially life-altering, terrifyingly liberating questions: for what, for whom, and ultimately, at what true, irreversible cost to your own precious, irreplaceable soul. Get ready. This is not intended as just another passive intellectual reflection, another interesting philosophical concept to file away. This aims to be a rupture, a deliberate necessary fracture in the comfortable, perhaps suffocating mask you habitually, perhaps unconsciously wear. We are going to talk about work, yes, but not in the way they typically taught you, not as the primary unquestionable source of identity, worth, and meaning. We are going to talk about productivity, but viewed critically, perhaps even scornfully, from the terrifying, liberating abyss of its potential profound meaninglessness when pursued as an end in itself. We are going to courageously, unflinchingly enter the often darker, more complex, more paradoxical, more sacredly profane parts of the human soul, the parts that crave intensity, experience, transgression, excess connection beyond utility. The parts where time is no longer measured solely obsessively in efficiently completed tasks in quantifiable output, but perhaps more authentically, more meaningfully, in moments of gloriously wasted, non-productive, yet intensely ecstatically, sovereignly lived life. And when you emerge from here, if you possess the rare courage, the unwavering focus to stay with this challenging, potentially destabilizing exploration until the very end, you will likely almost certainly not look at your own days, your own choices, your own existence in the same predictable, conditioned way ever again. Because maybe, just maybe, you will finally liberatingly discover that all this time, perhaps your entire life, you haven't genuinely been living. You were merely, efficiently, perhaps even successfully, perhaps even admirably, according to external standards functioning. And now that you know the profound life-altering difference, the crucial, unavoidable question becomes, what are you going to do with it?